Good morning, everyone. Good morning. There are plenty of seats up front and in the middle there. If anyone would like to not stand for the next 2 hours of our presentation, I welcome you to come to the front. I think I've used that joke before, but it works every time. I'm Scott Rothkopf, the Whitney's Alice Pratt Brown director, and I am delighted to welcome you to the press preview for Sixties Surreal. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Whitney period. We have had just an incredible summer with the success of Amy Sherald, American Sublime, which I know that you all will hopefully follow to see in Baltimore at the Baltimore Museum. We're also in the final minutes of our Christine Sun Kim show, and Kim will share with you other great things we have ahead. We also are in, I think, the full bloom of our free admissions programs. And I'm sorry, Kim, if you were meant to talk about them, were you? No. Okay, good, then I'm going to. I can't stand behind this podium in a room full of people and not talk about free admission at the Whitney. As you all know, we are now free every Friday night from 5 to 10, the second Sunday of every month. And during those hours, we are free for everyone, wherever you're from and whatever you want to see. And we are free all the time for anyone 25 and under. And these new programs now, not even 2 years old, the 25 and under are only 6 months old really, have led to an incredible transformation in our audience, which is now more than 10 years younger on average than it was before, so much more diverse, and so many new visitors coming to the Whitney to experience exhibitions like this. And it really has provided a way for us to think differently about why we exist and for whom. And the embrace of these audiences, I think, has given us so much joy, so much to be proud of, and a new idea of how we can continue to further our mission. So please spread the word. The great thing about free admissions programs for me is the more people who come, doesn't cost me anything more. So we want to, drive these audiences. We've seen a threefold increase of our 19 to 25-year-olds in just something like 6 or 7 months. That's just extraordinary. So I'll stop talking about free admission. You all have press cards anyway, so you've probably been free the whole time. But I will start talking about 60s Surreal. This is a show that has been, to say a long time in the making would be, I think, an understatement. I'll say a very long time in the making. And it traces its roots, in fact, to an internship that I had here at the Whitney Museum in the summer of 1998 in the old building with Elizabeth Sussman, who is one of the co-curators now of this show and unfortunately could not be with us today. But during that summer, I did work on an Eva Hesse show that ended up happening at SF MoMA under Elizabeth's direction. And it led me to kind of think differently about this period in the 60s and certain friends and colleagues that she had at that time and critics who supported the work of a group of artists that were a little bit outside the norm of art history as I had come to understand it. Let's say that march of isms, including pop, minimalism, conceptualism, color field painting. And I went back to college and actually ended up writing my senior thesis. It was called The Other 60s, The Return of Surrealism in American Art and Criticism. The show you see today is not my thesis. It is so much bigger, so much better. It includes many, many artists, 110 artists, and I could tell you more than 2/3 of them, I'm sure I didn't know who they were when I was a 22-year-old. And that is really thanks to the incredible contributions of our curatorial team. And I want to especially acknowledge Elizabeth, who I mentioned, as well as who you have before us, Laura Phipps, our associate curator, and Dan Nadel, our newly appointed Stephen and Ann Ames, curator of drawings and prints, but not new to this project. The three of us and Elizabeth have been working on it together for about 10 years. We've been also so grateful to have the help of Kelly Long and Rowan Diaz-Toth, who are right here and who have added so much to this project. And it truly was a team effort that involved also the generous input, collaboration, and dialogue with the entire curatorial team at the Whitney, who has probably tired of hearing us talk about this project, but also colleagues from around America and even the world who have done work on the artists and moments that are part of this show during the time that we were making it. So we were really able to benefit from that scholarship, and often it had been presented in geographically or identity-specific exhibitions that we sort of integrated, I think, into a more synthetic view of this moment. So what is this show about, and why did we call it 60s Surreal? And if you want to quibble with me about the definition of surrealism, we can do so right here afterwards. We all along wanted to suggest that this was not a show of surrealism proper with a capital S, as we know it from France between the wars, and as we'll soon see in a fabulous show coming to the Philadelphia Museum of Art around the centennial, a little bit after of the Surrealist Manifesto. This show was really taking the idea of the surreal with a little s, it's a word in Webster's, I promise, that kind of suggests a weird and bizarre alternative to reality as we supposedly know it. And what we found in looking at the 60s, and in particularly a group of artists mostly born after 1930, and our show begins in 1958 and ends in 1972. We kept trying to extend it a little bit more and more. We're like, oh, we really like this thing from 1973, but we have to draw the line somewhere. Was that for this generation of artists coming up after 1930, being born largely after 1930, in all different parts of America, they were not necessarily interested in that march of isms that I mentioned, or if they were interested in it, they were interested in critiquing and expanded beyond it. So some of the artists in this exhibition, of course, are quite well known. People like Yayoi Kusama, Klaus Oldenburg, artists associated with early pop, but many are not. And what we came to think of was how across this country, from the Bay Area to New York, Texas, Chicago, artists were looking to surreal ways of picturing a world that to them had become surreal. This was a time, of course, when there was the threat of nuclear annihilation. There was the Vietnam War. There were many different liberation and protest movements that were happening. People had TVs at the foot of their beds. That's a kind of weird new thing to experience if you're not used to having a moving picture like that in your home. Obviously, there was a psychedelic drug culture that was brewing, and so many more developments in contemporary society that led artists to maybe look beyond some of those isms as we knew them and find, again, this new way of picturing their experience and their reality. And Laura and Dan will talk a lot more in specific about that today. I think for us, we're very excited about the design of this show, which hopefully is, on the one hand, it's a very scholarly exhibition. You'll see in our catalog a ton of detail and a chronology, but we want this show to have a quality of experience that in a way puts you in a frame of mind, perhaps related to what some of the artists were exploring, maybe minus the LSD. But it's a show that also to us feels, I think, very Whitney in many ways. A lot of the artists that you see upstairs have been a part of our exhibition program, biennials, and our collection for a very long time. The Nancy Graves Camels, They Greet You, were shown in our Breuer building. I think about a third of the work in this show is from our collection, including many recent and planned on acquisitions. And so this idea that this museum has always been home to what might have seen in some cases a little bit less eccentric and doctrinaire than some of our peers is something that we're really embracing, and that makes this show, to me, feel very relevant at this time. And so finally, if you sort of take what had seemed eccentric, or maybe a sideshow in certain cities and certain stories and certain quarters of even this city, and you flip that idea on its head and say, wait, I think to quote Dan from an interview he gave recently, I don't think Christina Romberg seems that weird. I think the idea that a Donald Judd steel box is art is even weirder. And so what if we said, actually, that these sidelights of American art history, that this was actually the thing, that this was a way to look across the country, across a generation, and say, is this a kind of tendency, if not a movement, a sensibility that was, if not hiding, a little bit, repressed in plain sight? And we're happy to bring it forward. And I couldn't be more grateful to the entire staff of the Whitney who have helped us achieve that. When you look at this show, you can imagine just how complicated it was to bring loans from all over the place and install them in such an artful and, I think, beautiful manner. So we are grateful, as always, to our Board of Trustees, and especially to the sponsors of this exhibition. I want to acknowledge, this is the one time I always look at notes, Delta, the John R. Eckel Foundation, the Keith Haring Foundation, the Robert Lehman Foundation, and the Wyeth Foundation for American Art for their support of the catalog. We really depend on Some of these are quite long-time supporters of the Whitney, and we're so grateful for their help. With that, I'm going to end my remarks and invite Dan and Laura to the stage for the run of show. They will essentially do a walkthrough of the show, bringing the themes to light. We won't do a walkthrough upstairs, but then you can see the show on your own and we'll be available to answer questions. So thank you.
Take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you, Scott, for the introduction and for the guidance on the show all these years. So this show really begins structurally in the 1960s, as you would guess, with an interest in reassessing surrealism that for us really begins with Gene Swenson here on the bottom slide holding that question mark. And he's proposing something in his 1966 show, The Other Tradition, at the ICA Philadelphia. He's proposing, what if it was surrealism and not cubism that had emerged as the dominant force in American art after World War II? In other words, what if it was subject matter and not form that had been the primary focus for artists in those crucial atomic years? Swenson was really thinking about and talking to artists about feelings becoming things, a sort of unrepressed post-Freudian idea of making real how you really feel. At the same time, Artforum devoted an entire issue to surrealism, complete with a gorgeous Ed Ruscha cover, a drawing for which we have upstairs. And in 1968, MoMA presented their own surrealism show, which Swenson here is protesting because it was too focused on form, not content. We began with Swenson because we really wanted to kind of follow that idea. If we took that idea and thought, well, okay, that's essentially New York-centric, but what if we followed it out across the country, and what if we went through Chicago and all over California and elsewhere in the Midwest and down into Texas? What would we find? And what we found were both artist networks and series of exhibitions. We looked at, of course, The Other Tradition, as well as New York's eccentric abstraction, but then we realized through Elizabeth Sussman, actually, that eccentric abstraction had been, in a sense, talking to funk, that the sort of ideas of embodied forms in the show Eccentric Abstraction in 1967 were being paralleled in California by artists there, and that were then brought together in a show called Funk at the Berkeley Art Museum. We also found in MoMA, thank you, in MoMA, the New Documents exhibition, which the artist Stan Vanderbeek had called The Social Surreal. He proposed as a different kind of title for it. And we also found, of course, the Harry Who in Chicago and 66 Signs of Neon in LA. So we brought these shows together along with thematic ideas that we pulled out, ideas about sex, state violence, religion, and other currents of the long 60s. And we brought them together. For each thematic show, we sort of blew it up, took it apart, reconfigured it, added artists. We didn't want to reconstruct shows. We wanted to offer a sort of historically undergirded exhibition about what the 60s was without boundaries of segregation, without boundaries of geography, without boundaries of theory. What would it be if we took eccentric abstraction in New York, which was Lucy Lepard's show, and put it together with funk, since they were talking together anyway? What would it be if we took Harry Who and put it together with Gene Swenson's Other Tradition? This is the sort of process we undertook. The exhibition is structured across 10 rooms based on these themes and expanded historical shows. And of course, as some of you have already seen, it begins with camels. Camels. The 5th floor elevators open, and Nancy Graves's 3 Camels, which were last seen here in 1969, where they debuted at the Breuer. these camels are meant to signal that this is not your history book surrealism. It's a show about disorientation and a new attempt to convey meaning through uncannily reconfigured objects and ideas in space. We want viewers, whoops, there we go. There's the camels. Let me see if I can get to the first gallery you're going to enter, or that you already have entered, is called Another Pop. It's rooted in Swenson's The Other tradition, but expanded across the country. It focuses on artists who are both reflecting the experience of extreme socio-political change through jarring juxtapositions and scale shifts, and it's very object-oriented. It's really playing to the sudden ubiquity beginning in the late 50s of consumer goods of all kinds and sizes, and a sudden reorientation of the body as object and subject, not unlike what's contained within that single James Rosenquist painting that hangs over the gallery as a sort of totemic object. We have classics from the collection, like this Paul Tech, and Rosenquist on loan. And the next gallery is another historically undergirded space. Body Ego combines the 1967 exhibition Eccentric Abstraction, which was a kind of response to the other tradition, and its corollary on the West Coast, the Funk Show at UC Berkeley. But again, expanding it beyond the handful of artists included in those shows. So we really wanted to run the gamut of embodied forms, from Louise Bourgeois to Jeremy Anderson's polychrome intestinal object, River Run.
Great, I'll move us into the next gallery, one we're calling Social Surreal, which is a gallery that focuses on artists, photographers in particular, who were looking outside of themselves, maybe moving out of that body ego and looking into everyday American life, seeing that it was off kilter, that it was weird, that it was, as Scott mentioned, small as sort of vernacular surreal. And this recognition of surrealism's proximity to reality was pointed out by artists like Adra Cohen's, who is capturing moments on the street in the city of New York, as well as in works like Luis Jimenez's Blonde TV Image, which is really addressing the sort of unnerving presence of televisions in the home, that this the post-war life that's being transmitted into everyone's living rooms is really changing a sort of relationship with reality. From there, we move into a dedicated space for the lyrical and layered film of young filmmaker Ed Owens, a portrait of the artist's mother and aunt that combines staged and documentary footage to really create these complementary visions of reality and of fantasy. We continue to move through the next gallery, which we call Show of Force, and this really reflects that given the show is about a moment in time, an era, the art of this moment really naturally reflects what artists were seeing, what they were experiencing in the world, what they were bringing back into their studios. And this might seem sort of, quaint now to think from our vantage point of, 24-hour news cycle and TikTok and a computer in our pocket, but really for the first time in the 60s, Americans were watching daily reports of political assassinations, of the violent oppression, of protests, of the escalation of the Vietnam War, and artists were responding to this really disorienting political era through their art. Many participated in direct action, in protests themselves, but the works in this room really more illustrate the many ways that this violence and oppression was being experienced, being internalized, and then being expressed through the art of the moment. So some works in this show, like this Peter Saul and the Whitney's collection, are critiquing the war in Vietnam in really bombastic and sort of hard to look at terms. Other paintings in the gallery, like this T.C. Cannon work, are can be seen as more surrealist translations of actual historical events, real historical trauma that resonated to the artist in their present moment, this sort of reminder of the way that the past really does repeat. Move on.
Okay, If you've visited the exhibition already, you may have noticed Harold Stevenson's New Adam. It's a little hard to see, of course, but hopefully you managed. This, as you go far east, I should say, on the 5th floor, you'll run into this space of 4 iconic objects. One is Harold Stevenson's The New Adam. This was painted initially for the Guggenheim's 6 artists in the object. It just went out of my mind. The 1963 exhibition, but was actually rejected and was first shown in Paris instead. It was shown recently at the Guggenheim, and we have brought it out again. For us, it really represents the sort of disorienting scale shifts and new relationships to one's body and to other bodies that were so prevalent in the 1960s. It's also modeled on one of the great cinematic queer icons of mid-century, Sal Mineo. So it's Sal Mineo's body and Lord Willoughby, who was Harold Stevenson's lover at the time, his head. And of course, it also alludes to a dream state, somebody reclining, dreaming, not really knowing, and it could be anyone. We also, in this gallery, have Don Potts's My First Car, which also was shown at the Whitney, like the Nancy Graves camels, about 55 years ago. This was an amazing set of sculptures that Don Potts, who also exhibited in both funk and the eccentric abstraction, he completed these in the late 60s and early 70s, and they're meant to both be kind of familiars, bodies in a sense, but also cars. And he imagined them taking on different clothing, different kinds of surfaces, and changing and developing as his thoughts changed. Elsewhere in the gallery, you'll find Jess's If All the World Were Paper and All the Waters Sink, which is a summary, in a sense, of the entire 20th century. Atomic anxiety, rebirth, eros, and the mysterious hands of power are all baked into that painting, as well as our object that sort of hung over the whole exhibition for me, which is H.C. Westerman's The Big Change. It's a really enigmatic object. It's Westerman's great masterpiece, and at least in the context of this show, symbolizes both something that can never really be understood. It's also an impossible object, and it also functions as a connecting object for all the artists in the show. Westerman was, in this show, a kind of connector from coast to coast, down through Texas and up through Chicago, all over the place. And this room, we hope people will just sort of take a moment after a very busy bunch of galleries before they go into the next phase of the show, which begins with assembling. This is a gallery that really, more than any of the others, takes the formalist approach to art making that's connected to historic surrealism. Of course, surrealists in the 1930s, working with seemingly discordant materials and objects, was a way to challenge rationality and invoke poetic assumptions. In the 1960s, similar techniques became central for artists working particularly in California as critiques of consumer culture and commentaries on the destruction of urban landscapes all across the country. This is Ed Kienholz's John Doe, which is a great anti-war assemblage from Los Angeles. This gallery brings together a couple historical hooks, one of which is the 66 Signs of Neon exhibition, organized in 1966 by Noah Purifoy and Judson Powell, just the year after the Watts Rebellion. For Purifoy, his work, which is pictured here and is the sort of titular piece of that show, his work was about reconstituting what had been lost in his neighborhood, in his community, making something new from the ruins of the old, and showing that there can be a kind of rebirth even after the most bitter destruction.
Sure. So as we looked across the work of the 1960s and we think about sort of the big catalyst for change in this long decade, we really saw how these intersecting and overlapping struggles for liberation, for representation, influenced much of the thinking of artists. And even before sort of the women's liberation movement was in full swing, was in sort of full public consciousness in the early 1970s, women artists were creating an early feminist aesthetic, often using collaged imagery, imagining new fields of possibility for themselves, for their art, and challenging some of the ideas of societal ideas of women's work. So we have a number of works in this gallery, like Linda Loma Haftaway, offering really powerful imagery of women exerting themselves in landscape. We have Christina Romberg's biting paintings, her commentary and critique of sort of the strictures of women's roles and these exacting paintings. And then, of course, we have Marisol, who's thinking about some of these very similar topics around family and a sort of women's place in society, using sort of more surrealist strategies of collage and assembling. And then this takes us to the final gallery in the show, where you'll see the work of many artists whose search for alternatives to the institutions of Western religion in particular led to these explorations and real expansive thinking around spirituality, influence of sort of cultural histories of ancestral knowledge and interest in the occult that reoccurs through many works of this decade. And many artists like Betty Saar had a particular interest in astrology and palmistry and tarot, and these altar-like sculptures that Saar made contained references to all of these ideas, but they also contain what she called secret information that radiates something that makes you feel uneasy. Works also by Carlos Villa from our collection that really combine his own calligraphic abstractions with his renewed interest in his own Filipino culture, his interest in non-Western religions, and really come together to create this new visual language. We will also offer a film program in this theater on October 24th, which will include films by Kenneth Anger and Ken Jacobs and Ed Emschwiller that really recognize how film and video were really important ways for artists of the 1960s to explore some of these overarching themes of the exhibition and of the era itself. So we hope you'll come back for that. And then I have to plug the catalog, which I hope you all get a chance to read every single page, all 450-ish of them. It really functions as an alternative, but a backbone of the exhibition and some of our thinking, and it offers a really robust, artist-centered chronology of 1958 to 1972, this long 60s. It's richly illustrated, and we hope offers numerous paths for research and sort of discovery through the number of short essays. And then last but definitely not least, and while we have a captive audience, I just want to thank the incredible team at the Whitney that helped us put on this show. Every exhibition is a collaborative project, but this one maybe feels even more so. Dan and I really want to give our thanks to Scott Rothkopf and Elizabeth Sussman for these years of collaboration and dedication, and to really thank Kelly Long, Senior Curatorial Assistant, and Rowan Diaz-Toth, Curatorial Project Assistant, who have been with us on this journey as well, and the amazing team that supported the installation, led by coordinator Noam Parnas, registrars Brenna Cothran and Alyssa Flynn, and lead art handler Caitlin Birmingham. And as Scott said, the design was so important and integral to the experience of this show. I know people are cringing about some of these renderings that are up here. Hurry and get up and see the real thing. But we want to thank our exhibition designers, Melanie Taylor and Asili Coleman, as well as our publications department, education, and the amazing colleagues in our conservation department, marketing, publicity, graphic design. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the artists, those that support the artists, for your patience with us and your trust. And I am going to pass it to Kim, but I hope that everyone enjoys your day in 60s Surreal.
Thanks so much, Laura, Dan, Scott. I'm really thrilled to be here with you all today to celebrate this incredible undertaking that is 60s Surreal. And I promise to be quick so that you can get back up to the galleries or get up there for the first time. I wanted to, while I'm here, to first introduce myself. I am Kim Conaty, the Nancy and Steve Crown Family Chief Curator, and I'm excited to tell you a bit about some of the exhibitions that we have currently on view and a couple of the upcoming ones. Scott already mentioned Christine's son, Kim. You are literally in your final days of that exhibition. It closes September 21st. So I will mention a couple of others that will be on view for a handful more months, and you'll have another chance to come back. The first is also on the 5th floor where the 60s Surreal exhibition is, in our Kaufman galleries and our terrace. We're featuring this tour de force of digital art with Marina Zerko's Parting Worlds and her Hyundai Terrace commission, The River is a Circle. So as you see on the left in the Kaufman Gallery, we have two works from our collection that explore ecological and social systems through software-based works. And outdoors, for the Hyundai Terrace Commission, Zerko created a really ambitious site-specific work for our very first video wall that references Hudson River ecology and also the past and present of our neighborhood, from being a Lenape trading post to now the home of David Hammond's Days End, with, of course, cameos of the High Line and all of our hotels rampantly developing in the area. This software for The River is a Circle runs, the software that runs the animation actually responds to the time of day, the weather, and the season. So even if you've seen this once before, you will never actually see the same scene twice because it is constantly regenerating, so always worth a look. And we're really excited that this commission, Rivers a Circle, which was organized with Marina and our digital art curator, Christiane Paul, is now being presented every night through September 30th in Times Square as part of the Times Square Arts Midnight Moment. So if you find yourself free between 11:57 p.m. and 12 a.m., rush up to 42nd Street so that you can see this. Back at the museum, our 7th floor collection galleries are reopened with a new installation, Untitled America, which was named after Felix Gonzalez Torres's light string work that hangs like a beacon in our west-facing gallery windows. And you'll find many Whitney favorites from the first half of the 20th century through the early 1980s, from Hopper to Basquiat, alongside several new acquisitions. And we were really excited to refresh these galleries this summer on the occasion of the Whitney's 10th anniversary downtown on Gansevoort Street. And you'll see in the galleries a more attention paid to the sort of kind of more open, dynamic floor plan that really shows art in the place that we are here on the Lower West Side. As you're spending time in 60s Surreal today, don't miss Mary Heilman's Long Line on the west-facing end of the 5th floor galleries. And this, too, was an installation that was inspired by this 10th anniversary of the Whitney downtown, reprising Heilman's Sunset commission from our terrace from 2015, as you see on the left here. It now offers a beautiful, immersive waterfront moment of respite and reflection. And you see here the artist herself enjoying such a moment of museums being a place to hang out, as Heilman likes to say. And you even have a little cameo of Laura Phipps, the exhibition's curator you just heard from, on the far right of this image. Now, for coming soon, I'm going to just tell you about a few projects that will be opening in October, so very soon. We are really excited to celebrate another very important anniversary with High Wire Calder Circus at 100. This exhibition will take place in the 8th floor galleries and is really part of an exciting Calder moment. Many of you have read about Calder Gardens just opening really this week in Philadelphia. The Fondation Louis Vuitton will be doing a major Calder exhibition next year. This is not coincidental. 1926 is the beginning of Calder's work on the circus, the incredible work in the Whitney's collection. And so much thinking has been around as kind of centennial of this moment, a project that Calder worked on in Paris, but traveled traveled around with and performed back here in New York. So we'll be celebrating this pioneer of sculpture and performance at this critical moment, showing both the circus, our beloved icon of the collection, alongside other sculptures from this period, 1926 to the early 1930s, that show how the circus was so foundational to Calder's own thinking around balance, movement, and dynamism at this point in his career. This show will be organized by two of our curators, our recently promoted Marion Bolton Kippy Stroud curator of the collection, Jenny Goldstein, and her colleague Roxanne Smith, our Jennifer Rubio assistant curator of the collection. In the lobby gallery, also opening in October, we'll be continuing our Emerging Artist program, and very excited to be showing the work of Grace Rosario Perkins for her first solo museum exhibition in New York. And this is an opportunity to really showcase her kind of painting and performance-based practice. In this case, also, she'll be debuting a brand new sculpture that she is working on at this moment. And this is also an exciting moment to celebrate this New York and Santa Fe-based artist, to show her work in a really kind of creative installation that will fuse imagery inspired by her Diné tribal homelands in the American Southwest, alongside found objects, personal belongings, plant medicine, and popular culture. This exhibition is being organized by Adrienne Edwards, our Engelspire senior curator and associate director of the curatorial program. Finally, on the third floor, an exhibition that will really highlight one single work from our collection, though it is a work of 100 elements. So we'll be showing a part of Ken O'Hara's Contacts, which is an incredible photographic project that O'Hara embarked upon in 1974. It took him a little over 2 years to complete. This work is kind of his opus. And it is really a photographic experiment that involved mailing a camera and film to individuals across 36 states with a request that they document their daily life and send the film back to the artist. From this, he created these incredible contact sheets that then he developed as larger photographs. And so looking at the work as a whole, what you get is this incredible rumination on American daily life in its most mundane moments. And also, I think will feel like a really prescient look at today's image sharing culture. So we welcome you back in October for the opening of these exhibitions, and hope you enjoy the 60s Surreal exhibition today. Scott, Laura, and Dan are standing by to debate surrealism with you. And with that, I think we can allow you to head back up to the galleries. Do you have anything else to add? No? Okay.